Hello. The Divine Code reading for January 17th, pages 447 and 448. We are currently in the chapter, The Prohibition of Causing Personal Injury or Damage. Topic number 12. A master may not strike a servant who is slacking in his duties in order to subdue him to do a desired task. Shokanor Harav, Laws of Bodily Damage, topic number 4. Rabbi Zalman Goldberg notes that it appears that if one sold himself as a slave, the master may chasten him physically, but only with a rod or strap that will not cause bodily damage, as explained by Rambam, Laws of Murderers, 2:14. And in the area of slaves, it's very complicated. There's differences between, within the Jewish law, there's differences between a Jewish slave and a non-Jewish slave. And in the case of a non-Jewish slave, those that are captured in conquest versus those who sell themselves into slavery. And there's many different forms and all that. But what that's referring to the Jewish master being able to do. But in the case of the non-Jewish master, the ruling here would be that the master does not have the permission to strike the slave, and that may or may not be a strict case, but it's even if it was allowed, it'd only be allowed in a minor way. So it would be in a similar case as to a child or a teacher for a student. It might be allowed or it might not be, but definitely would not be allowed to just beat a slave. Topic number 13. One who injured or embarrassed another, even with words, does not receive full atonement for his distress, for the distress he caused, just through the restitution determined by the court. His sin is only forgiven when he asks forgiveness from the injured person and appeases him. It is not proper for the person who is harmed to be cruel and unforgiving. Rather, when he sees that the person who harmed him truly wishes to seek his forgiveness, he should pardon him. Rambam, The Laws of Injury and Damages, chapter 5, 9, and 10, Shokanor Karav, Laws of Bodily Damage, topic 6, based on Tractate Baba Kama 92a, which records the story of King Avimelech, Genesis chapter 20. He was obligated and so instructed by God to ask forgiveness from Abraham for abducting his wife. Clearly, this law applies to Gentiles as well as to Jews. So we see in the example given in the Bible, we see Avimelech. Avimelech had inadvertently caused problems for Abraham. He had inadvertently he required to ask permission. He required to ask forgiveness and receive forgiveness from Abraham for taking Sarah, and that was necessary. He couldn't just simply, do what was necessary. Pay him a bunch of sheep or something and send him on his way. He had to ask forgiveness from Abraham, and Abraham did the right thing and prayed for Avimelech for healing, and that was Abraham forgiving Avimelech. Chapter number 7. The prohibition of endangering oneself or another, and the obligation to save a person's life. Topic number 1. It is forbidden to place oneself in danger, such as fasting longer than the body can stand. Shishokanork, Arav, or Akaim, 618, 111. That one who fasts to the point of mortal danger violates the verse, but your blood of your souls I will demand. Therefore, it seems that this law is a part of the prohibition against suicide, which is also binding on Gentiles. So similar to how we're not to damage ourselves, we're also not to bring ourselves into a location of mortal danger. We're not to endanger ourselves, because it's just a problematic. It's just it puts us in the realm where we're liable to be injured, and we're not allowed to injure ourselves, and therefore we're not allowed to put ourselves in harm's way. Other types of endangerment or life or health. It is likewise forbidden to place others in danger or to cause hazard for the community, such as to dig pits and the like in a public property, or to keep dangerous animals in the area where others frequent, since another person may be harmed through these actions. Likewise, a person is obligated to erect a fence around the accessible roof and porches of his house in order that no one will fall from them. Okay, Ak, chapter 366. So likewise, the same way we're not allowed to harm ourselves or put ourselves in danger. We're not allowed to put ourselves in danger. Likewise, we're not allowed to put other people in danger. The people around us, the community, and that we're responsible to maintain things in a safe manner. We're responsible for our actions, how it affects other people. A person must guard his own potentially harmful entities, such as a fire lit on his property, or the animals, such as cattle, from entering into another person's property and causing damage. If one's bull haphazardly gorges people, and has been witnessed gorging people 3 times, and then once again gourds a person, though the owner does not receive a death penalty, he does have to take any direct action, as he did not take any direct action through not guarding his bull. So he did not push the bull to harm a person. However, he had a bull that was known to be a dangerous thing, and he did not guard the bull. And the bull just went about doing what it is expected to do, and it damages another person. He is held responsible for that damage, even though he's not directly the person doing it. If he was directly the person doing it, then he would be held criminally liable. But this is he still has a level of liability here, because it's his bull, and he knew it had problems with goring people, and yet he did not make safeguards, and another person got gored. Therefore, even though he would not, if the person died from the goring, he would not be liable for the murder, but yet he still has a level of responsibility for it. Nevertheless, the court is obligated to give him a severe penalty for causing death through his irresponsibility. See Rambam, Laws of Monetary Damage, Chapter 10, which holds that in the Noahide who holds that in the Noahide Code, the ox is not killed and the owner has no liability. However, Ramban on Genesis 9:2 holds that by Torah law, an ox of a Gentile that kills another Gentile must be killed. As it says there, of every beast I will demand it. It is unclear if the king or a blood redeemer has permission to kill the animal's owner. Since it is written in Exodus 21:29 and 30, the owner of the ox shall die, and that the fine will be imposed upon him, which means that the Jewish owner is liable to death by the hand of heaven, but he receives atonement through paying a fine. So within the okay, so we would not normally kill the ox according to the Jewish argument for killing the ox, because in the Jewish law they have a specific way of handling this, and they have reasons where within the Jewish law to handle it, where in which they kill the ox, the goring ox. In the case of the Noahide law, that direct commandment or the direct halakkas do not apply. However, we do have the requirement that from the earlier verse in Genesis, where much of the issues or the halakkas concerning murder are learned from for non-Jews, and that implies that the animal would be killed. Now, the question is whether or not they would also execute the owner of the animal. And the idea is that we, due to the way that it's explained within the Jewish law, is that the owner would not be executed, but rather would pay a fine, and that the execution would be in the hand of heaven. And generally the Noahide laws are more lenient than the Jewish laws in these cases, and therefore, if the Jewish law does not require death, then the Noahide law would not require capital punishment. But the question is whether or not a government might decide to hold the person liable. Would the government be allowed to add its own capital punishment in this case? And that would still be an open question. The footnote continues. Now, since in Torah law, Gentiles do not have the rules of fines for violations of their Noahide commandments, the owner should be regarded as any other murderer who is liable to death by the hand of heaven and who can be executed by decree of the king or killed by the blood redeemer. So we have, this can be determined by each society can determine whether or not they would execute the owner of the ox. I mean, if the ox has already gored other people and the person neglects, just doesn't care, and another person gets gored, that would be considered gross negligence. And therefore, the court would have the option to step in, and perhaps even a requirement to step in. And the blood redeemer would also have the opportunity to come in, depending upon how the local government has the blood redeemer set up, the rules for the blood redeemer set. So the local government would be able to determine what to do in those cases. And though it is possible to say that since a Gentile's ox has a more lenient judgment than the ox of a Jewish person, so the owner should not be liable. Nevertheless, inasmuch as the owner did cause death through his negligence, it is logical that he is liable to death by the hand of heaven, and he can therefore be killed by the king or the blood redeemer. Now, this is an important principle that's been placed in here. It's placed in brackets in the footnote. Is that it indicates here a possible rule, and we should go into more in the section on Dinham later in the Divine Code. What's being presented here is the idea that if there is a case where it can be judged by it can be punished through the hand of heaven. The person might, there's various situations where if a person does this or that, it's said to be judged by the hand, or he could receive death by the hand of heaven. And in the case where he can receive death by the hand, liable to death by the hand of heaven, that would be the allowance for the king to, or for the whatever government is set up, the court system is set up. That would be the allowance for that person to determine to do it, to execute the person themselves. That might be a rule of thumb that exists within the Noahide Code. We'll learn more about that in the future in the section on courts. It appears that if there is no other recourse to protect oneself from the habitually dangerous animal, its owner is considered as a pursuer, and he may be killed so that it does not let his animal run free. It is clear that it is permitted to kill a dangerous animal, even though it belongs to someone else, since it is a danger to the public and will be discussed in part 4, topic 7 and 8, page 340, 348. So that's on the prohibition of eating meat from a living animal. That we're allowed to kill an animal if it's a danger, is what's being explained there. So even if it belongs to somebody else, if it's a dangerous animal, we have an obligation to kill it in order to prevent it from being a danger. And we might also have an obligation if the owner is just incredibly reckless. If that's what's necessary, it would also might involve killing the owner, as the owner would be a pursuer at that point, if there's no other way to do it, if there's no other way to prevent the goring ox or something similar to that. Thank you.